Hello. At Wharton School of Business, G. Richard Shell teaches the popular course, Success Course, which focuses on two important questions. What does it mean to be successful? And how do you actually achieve success? There is a good chance that your notions on the subject have shaped your choices both personally and professionally. And it's part of what led Shell to write his latest book, Springboard, Launching Your Personal Search for Success. Hi, I'm Jada A. Graves, the careers editor at U.S. News, and I'm joined by Richard, who's here to explain how to identify your own personal meaning for success and how doing so could impact your career. Welcome, Richard. Thanks for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Jada. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So first off, why don't we start off with what made you decide to write this book?
Sure. I've been teaching a course at Wharton on the meaning of success since 2005.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of a lifelong dream of mine to teach this course. But every year I have the same subject as the final paper topic. And each student has to write what they think success means to them and how they plan to achieve it. And every year when they hand in their papers, they say, well, Professor Shell, where's your final paper? And I've held them off for quite a while. This is a course about you. I get to grade it. You have to write the paper. But in the end, I, about 3 years ago, decided I would give it a try. And the book, Springboard, is essentially my final paper for the course on what I think the most useful steps are for understanding the meaning of success for yourself, and then also the steps most people take to achieve their vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So the next question I have is a bit of a two-parter. As you've talked to people, what have you found has been the general notion people have of success when they're first entering the work world? And then the second part of that question would be, how is success redefined for them as they mature and they become more established?
Okay. The research now is that people will go through 5 to 6 to 7, sometimes as many as 10 different career changes over their lifetime. So I think this question is even more important for this generation than it might have been 30 or 40 years ago. When I teach undergraduates, their big question is, will I get my first job? And I'm sympathetic to that. They have student loans. But my job for them is to try to begin getting them to think for themselves about what their own goals and aspirations should be, and not just doing what their parents or their families suggested was the most important thing, or some of the more exotic ideas that kids get about success, usually derived from television, professional sports, celebrity culture. So I try to get them to wake up to their own unique talents and begin thinking about what success might mean to them. As they get a little older, I teach MBA students. MBA students usually have a career in mind, and so for them, it's much more a question of helping them consider the beginning of balancing a professional life with having a family, having significant relationships, pursuing hobbies, a little bit more work-life balance. And then as I move up the chain, tomorrow, for example, I'm teaching a group of senior executives who are 50 years old. And for them, I will probably be talking about how they can mentor other people so that they can understand that their own unique visions of success may not be shared by everyone that works for them.
Right.
In a global economy, ideas of success will change by culture.
Mm-hmm.
It might be quite different to be thinking about what success means for someone who lives in Kenya or who lives in Argentina or in Japan. And also how they may be thinking about changing their concepts of success into their next leadership position or even into retirement. And again, the more intrinsic ideas, what kind of service can they be to other people now that they've achieved some status in their careers? How can they use that to give something back? That tends to be the kinds of questions that they're asking.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question and a great answer. So I guess one of my favorite parts of the book was when you were discussing failure, specifically because I'm a perfectionist, and I loved the part about learning to fail. So how important is it to learn to slip up, and how do these mistakes fit into defining and achieving success?
That's a great question. So I actually think that failure is probably the most important thing to learn if you're going to be truly successful. If you're afraid to fail, you're going to tend to do the same thing over and over and over, something you control, something you know that you can do reasonably well and not be criticized for it. And you're not going to take as many risks. You're not going to learn as much. You're not going to create new relationships because you're sticking to the ones you have that work. So there are two pieces of this in the book. Failure itself can be devastating, and so it can be a test of confidence. And when a big failure comes, it often means you have to re-establish your sense of sort of self-worth, establish your relationships again, and begin remembering that you're a competent person. When little failures come, I think that's where you learn. Just like when you were a kid and you tried to learn a new sport or a new musical instrument, you had to be willing to flub it up in order to get better. And that's true for public speaking. It's true for negotiations. It's true for any kind of job skill. It's true for setting up a new part of an enterprise someplace. You have to, trial and error is part of the process of success. So in that sense, you have to get comfortable with it. So I think one other point I'd like to make.
Sure.
The success industry, very, very keen on positive feelings, happiness, positive thinking. And I'm a big fan of that. But I think negative emotions, fear, the sense that you haven't done your best work, these can be incredibly important messages to you to help you learn that you need to change direction, to help you learn that you're not as good as you thought you were, and you ought to take some time and get better. So the message in success that you always have to be positive is a good one, but I think you have to be open to the messages that you might sometimes be dissatisfied and sometimes get a little down. That teaches you things.
Yes. Amen. I feel like you're speaking right to me there. so thanks for that. So you mentioned earlier that you speak to students of various ages at various times in their lives. What has their response been to the book? And what kind of follow-up questions did they have for you?
Sure. The interesting thing about this book is that it engages people at different levels of questions. Some people haven't actually thought about success at all. And so the first half of the book really challenges them to understand that they may have been pursuing the wrong goal. So I have students, I'll give you an example. Just last week, I wrote 2 letters of recommendation for Wharton students. That's a business school, business student. One of them was for a young lady who's been out of school for 2 years, took my course, and is now reapplying to nursing school.
That is a sharp change.
Well, it's not only a sharp change, she's going back to undergraduate studies and she's taking an accelerated course at NYU to get the nursing part done so she can then pursue it into the professional training. So that's the kind of change people make when they read a book like this, when they begin thinking about it carefully. In her case, she loves helping people. She loves working with her hands. And she was really terrible at business. So she had a great degree, wrong career. So now she's going to restart. And someday, I'll predict, she'll be the head of a hospital someplace. Because she's eventually going to combine the Wharton degree with her nursing experience and become a wonderful administrator for the healthcare system. So I think that's what can happen when people re-engage with fundamental questions about who they are and what they ought to do. I was trying to think. The other student I wrote a recommendation for is someone who's been out of school a couple of years, and now he's actually applying to go to England to study international relations and try to become a diplomat.
Okay.
So I think this question really helps you set direction and reset it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So last question then that I had for you, it's semi-related to the other question that I had, which was, once you crack the surface on what success means for you and how you're going to achieve it, hopefully after people who've actually read this book, what are the next steps? And if you could possibly relate it to something in your own personal experience, that would be great, because there's a lot of your own personal experience in this book.
Sure. Well, Jada, I think once you've sort of begun designing the kind of theory of success that is meaningful to you, and you've sort of gotten over, I'm going to be the most famous person in the world, I'm going to be the richest person in the world, I'm going to be the president of the United States, and you get on with what your life is really going to be about. Then I think the process is one of looking inside, seeing what you're competitively good at, the combination of things that you do well, and then looking to see what kinds of activities, careers, volunteer work call on you to do those things so that you can get experience and learn to get a little better. And I'll give you, in my case, I spent a couple of years traveling around the world thinking about these fundamental questions. I was in Buddhist monasteries, and it's a long story. But I came back to the United States, and I began the process of finding what I could do. And it started by thinking, I'm better at words than I am at math, and so what kinds of professions require you to use words? I decided law was one of those. I went to law school. And then about a year into law school, realized that I didn't like the law that much, but I did still love words. And one day I was sitting in class, and I was in a room with 150 students. There was a wonderful teacher standing in front of the room, and he had every single one of us sitting on the edge of our seat, waiting to answer his question. And all of a sudden, I had this moment of self-awareness, like a little light bulb struck. And I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be the guy in front of that room. And so I sort of seized on this idea of being a teacher. So I spent the next 5 years trying to figure out how I could use what I knew, use my law degree, to find a professional career in teaching, and that's where I am now. And I've been teaching here at Wharton for 27 years and loving every day of it. So it's an incremental process, but a lot of it is noticing your own emotions, your own interactions with different activities, and making sure that you keep moving toward the ones you like better.
Great. Well, that's a great place to close. I feel like we've had the opportunity to sit in on your class today, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. So once again, Richard Shell's book is titled Springboard, Launching Your Personal Search for Success. He's also the author of Bargaining for Advantage and Make the Rules or Your Rivals Will. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Jada.